So yeah, my chair has changed, but that's because I've been doing some very intense dinkum sessions at night with Mr. Soap and Clay, and I need the recliner to do that because that's how my gaming life works. But aside from that, it's still business as usual this week, and we are going to be continuing on with fun recipes and FAQs. And today is an FAQ, and I will tell you more about that FAQ in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudzers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. And you are here for week 31 of year 3 and FAQ day. So we are going to be talking about the IFRA. Now, as a soap maker, I'm sure you know what the IFRA is. But do you know what it is actually? And one of the reasons why we're going to do this very fast and dirty, just Q&A type, format, whatever, is because recently the IFRA has proposed or has adopted a new amendment, and it is starting to implement today as far as compliance goes. And there have been a lot of questions within the soap making world regarding our fragrance and our max usage and what that means for us, because on this new amendment, we have a number of actual ingredient components that have been prohibited or restricted in use, and that is going to consequently then change the usage rates of some of our products for our Cat 9 purposes. But I thought it might be fun to give you a quick overview of what the IFRA actually is, who governs it, all of the jazz, and then answer the big question, which is, what do I do with all these fragrances that I currently have if the IFRA Cat 9 ratings are changing? So let's get to the video. I'm going to be pouring a very beautiful batch of soap while we do so, and we'll talk all about it. So first up, it is important to note that the IFRA and compliance to adherence of, requirements is not codified by these United States of America. And I do not believe it's codified in the EU, which means it's not a requirement by the law to adhere to anything within the IFRA. Now, this is different from, say, OSHA, which is codified. This is law to essentially protect workers from harm and or, death at work, and is OSHA is reasonably what governs our MSDS pages. So our data sheets that we are getting for all of the chemicals et al. That we will put and use within our working facility, up to and including, our Pyrex and, lye. So with that, it is important to note IFRA, not a legal requirement, but instead was adopted essentially to circumvent or make it not necessary for the government to have to involve themselves in regulating everything that goes into the fragrance, creation. I stress this right off of the bat to help you understand why it is so important for you to only buy your fragrances from a company that does have their IFRA pages, that is in compliance, and that is a member of the IFRA, because ultimately you as the end user, as the creator, you are responsible for the end user and their safety. So you need to make sure that you know exactly what's going into those products and whether or not they have been restricted or prohibited because of, potential carcinogens or, skin sensitivities or the like. So what is the IFRA responsible for? Realistically, the IFRA have taken up the responsibility to essentially compile through an evaluation process, all scientific research, risk assessment, and expert consensus, from doctors and scientists and whatnot, all potential things that go into a fragrance and all of the risk assessments involved to ensure safety for the end user. It is important to note, though, that the IFRA themselves, they do not conduct the tests on the fragrances directly. Instead, they kind of rely on the expertise of the companies that are members. And so we have fragrance manufacturers and, again, doctors and scientists and whatnot, team of scientists that will conduct these tests in order to assess the safety of any potential fragrance that exists or ingredient within a fragrance that exists, and then compiles the data, and we have it. So we know the correct usage rates for, say, a baby wipe versus a soap versus a linen spray versus a candle. That's where these categories come from. And again, very important to know, IFRA does not conduct these tests on their own. Rather, the fragrance companies do. How does this fit into the soap world, right? Because we aren't regulated. The FDA doesn't care about us. We can, do what we want with the soap and whatever. Well, I mean, that's true, except we are still regulated by the whole notion of any product that we put out for consumer purchase has to be safe. And so that's why we need to pay attention to the IFRA and make sure that we are falling within those ratings every time that we make a soap, right? And so talking about the ratings and how they're determined, basically, I would say 4 main things are considered when they determine the IFRA ratings. And those 4 things, the first up would be obviously an ingredient valuation. So evaluate the individual fragrance components to assess the potential risks of each individual ingredient for, the risks on human health or the environment, and uses really all available data we have. So toxicological data, doctor reportings, exposure levels, or any sort of specific concern that has been, logged because, time has gone on and we found out that something is bad for you, right? Number 2 would be exposure assessment, which kind of falls in with ingredient evaluation, but it does assess the potential exposure to the individual ingredients by considering, what kind of products they're used in. So, and how high of a dose and how often you're going to be using them. That's why we have a difference in the categories and the percentage use that you can use from a leave-on product to a soap, to a rinse-off product, or from something that goes in or near your mouth or, not. And so that's going to be a very important, piece of this as well. Number 3 would be, overall risk assessment. The IFRA is going to conduct a risk assessment to determine the overall safety levels of the fragrance ingredients within consumer products, which helps establish those concentration limits or the restrictions for specific ingredients that have been determined to be harmful. Harmful meaning, maybe carcinogenic or maybe not, and it's just, dermal sensitization. So that's how we get our safety limits for sure. And then the 4 is going to be overall the expert consensus. I mean, the scientific committee that exists within the IFRA, lots of experts from lots of different fields of study. So they all come together and they review all possible data and make the determinations as to, is X ingredient within this fragrance good? If so, at what percentage? What is the max whatever? So they can create all the proper categories, concentrations, and overall, whether or not you can even use it. So it does provide, as a result of these 4 main components, good guidelines for the, end user in order to purchase their scents and to use them within their products to ensure that the consumer is not going to end up injured in any way, shape, or form. Now, again, the reason why we're talking about this is because there was recently an amendment to the IFRA, and people are kind of freaking out about it. I would say don't freak out about it, because this has happened before. This is Amendment 51, for crying out loud. So it's happened 50 more times. The reason why it's, come up, and they have put some things on the prohibited list, and they have put some other things on, allowed, but within very strict, measures or whatever, some specific ingredients or compounds, is because we know more. The IFRA has been going on for 40 years and science continues to advance. Studies continue to be done with all things. Like asbestos was fine until it wasn't, right? Those sorts of things. So thinking about that as far as how this makes sense, and a company and an organization is continuing to update the standards, I think is a smart it's smarter to look at it as a good thing that we have new amendments to this, not as a bad, scary thing. It's just giving you another added layer of confidence in the safety of the fragrances that you are putting in with your products. So what are the big changes that have come? Well, realistically, really nothing to do with us per se. Mostly the big changes that have come with this amendment are involving paper products, and so like fabric softener sheets and wet wipes and the jazz, as well as some new chemical compounds, some ingredients that have been determined to be not as safe as we thought before. So let's, lessen the amount that you can reasonably put within a fragrance formula, or let's prohibit them entirely. Now, this is because of, new toxicology reports, or perhaps just thinking about, a face cream could also end up in the eye. And so we have to limit, we have to change the essential maximum use for fragrances or specific ingredients because of, new information. This is a completely normal thing. It's fine. Will that mean that some of your scents are going to go down with their IFRA, with their max use? Yeah, no, totally, they will. There will be some that will go down. And in the next few years, you may start to see that. What you won't see is how they're probably changing all of the compounds themselves, so you can probably still have the max usage that you had before, but they're just going to be using a different ingredient that is, safer. But it really will be within the next few years. They have given timelines from, I think, today until like the end of October, end of 2025 to comply with all of the new regulations. So a question that I've been asked a lot from soap makers since news of, the new IFRA amendment came out is, what about the scents that I currently have in my possession? Can I still use them at the percentages that I was using them before? Well, that's a double-edged sword right there, because I don't have the answer, because I don't exactly know how you soap. But if you were soaping, like most soapers, I would say yes, and here's why. So I have in front of me right now my favorite scent from Tierra Candles, right? It is a Tom Ford dupe, tobacco vanille. It is everything in this world. For Cat 9, which is what we are for soap, it is 24%. You can use that at a concentration of 24% within your soaps. And so for like a 50-ounce batch of soaps, you have like 38 ounces of oils or whatever. What is that, like 9 ounces? That's insane. I would never put that much fragrance in. You couldn't put that much fragrance in because there would be way too much unsaponifiables within the batch itself, and this fragrance would just start seeping. It'd be a big old mess. I tend to soap all of my fragrances between 5 and 7%. And so, yeah, there's not going to be any of these changes that are going to take a fragrance like, this Tom Ford with a 24% max usage down to under 5 or 7%. Like, that's not what's happening within all of this. So, yes, I would say you continue to soap this business as usual, assuming that you are soaping to the fragrance, to ensuring that you are just putting enough fragrance in that it is a well-scented bar without it being, overpowering or whatever. As long as you're responsibly using your fragrance, and if you are creating successful batches of soap, you are responsibly using your fragrance, because you're not losing a lot of your fragrance again to all the weeping that you're going to get, because it's not going to sponify and it's just going to get gross and seep out, then yeah, you should be good to go. Now, that said, I only select fragrances. When I buy new fragrances, the first thing I do is go look at the IFRA and make sure that the percentage usage is at least 10%, so I know that I'm always in the clear. So if you're working with somebody that's maybe like 2 or 3%, you might have some issues there, for sure. And there it is, a fast and dirty IFRA knowledge drop. We are going to be doing something more in depth with the IFRA very, very soon. So definitely subscribe, notify, whatever, for when we do that, because you're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be epic. But for these purposes, yeah, it's a good idea to know the overall guidelines, like what the IFRA is. Again, realistically, it was created because the governmental bodies did not really want to start messing with and having to regulate a very large industry of fragrance manufacturers. So the IFRA is sort of the stopgap between all of that. The majority of fragrance companies out there are members of and do comply with the IFRA guidelines, which is why I say again, if you're getting fragrances, only get them from places that have the IFRA on their fragrances. There's no point in risking your safety or your end user's safety by going with the very few number of, companies that aren't doing that right now, for sure. It's a lot like, the responsibly sourced palm movement. It's easy enough to get responsibly sourced palm. Just do it. Same thing. But within all of this, as I said in the video, not much is really going to change for us. Like I said at the end, just barely. If you are using your percentages, if you are using fragrances that have a very low max usage, like 2-3%, then yeah, you have a problem, potentially. That said, you're probably already blending those fragrances. I'm thinking like an apple cinnamon type, scent or whatever. The ones that have really low usage rates for Cat 9, you're probably already blending them with other things to ensure that the overall soap is well scented. So I would consider maybe eliminating them until you know for sure whether or not this is one that has, a potential lowered max usage. Or, do what I do and only go for the fragrances that have a Cat 9 of at least 10%. Also, as I said in the video, nobody's soaping at above, 10% with their fragrances, or at least they shouldn't be. It's really a waste of product because everything that won't get bound up with like inside of the kind of honeycomb pattern that saponification is just going to seep out of the bar. So you're just wasting money to go too terribly far with your percentages. So yeah, you should be fine continuing to use the scents that you currently have. Also, since the IFRA is giving essentially 2 years for fragrance manufacturers to comply with all of this. So like starting today, it's all new products have to abide by the new usage, toxicity ratings, and all the jazz. And all of the old existing products, they're giving them effectively 2 years to phase them out. They're allowing them to sell through their inventory and reformulate. So do keep that in mind when you're making your decisions as to whether or not you can keep using the scent that you have. For my part, I think you're going to be safe. You're going to be good to go. The IFRA has done a great service to the world in general in compiling all these toxicity reports, talking to the experts, assembling panels and committees to determine, if we have not only just like dermal sensitization, but also potential carcinogens and acute toxicity, lots of other problems, so we can feel confident using a fragrance oil, knowing that the end user is not going to be harmed by it. So definitely pay attention to those ratings, continue using and soaping responsibly, and be awesome, for sure. If you guys have any questions specifically about IFRA, this is the video to comment on, and I will answer all those questions down in the comments below. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Hope you guys are having an amazing Wednesday. Yes, I am out of here. Thank you to the Sudzers. You guys are awesome and excellent and all of the things, but you probably already know I have to go because the Soap and Clay Kidlets have a back-to-school meet and greet night, which is strange at this point because they've been in this school for like 4 or 5 years. So I've already met and greeted everybody, but we're going to do it again tonight. So I got to zoom. Thank you for existing, for being here. I am going to go, as I said, but I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another round of FAQ. Soapy fun. Bye.